great to have you. Where are you located, by the way?
I'm in the northern Mexico, Monclova Coahuila, Mexico.
Okay.
I'm about 100 and few miles from Eagle Pass, Texas.
From which part of Texas?
Eagle Pass.
Eagle Pass. Okay.
Yeah.
I used to live in
South
Texas.
of San Antonio.
You were in San Antonio.
To the south of San Antonio. I can drive, and in 5 hours I will be in San Antonio.
Okay. All right. I know kind of where it is. I lived in Austin, Texas. I actually lived in San Antonio for a little while as well when I was in my military. Well, welcome. Thank you for doing this. Now, your specialty as a physician is orthopedics, correct?
Yeah, that's right.
So I know a little bit about that stuff. I used to do that
we both.
for a long time.
We both
But
know a
anyway,
little.
so tell me a little bit about just tell us a little about your background, if you don't mind.
Okay, well, I studied elementary and all that here in Monclova, my hometown, and I went 1 year to Merrimack, New Hampshire. So I did sophomore, so that's why I speak a little bit of English. It's my second language, so sorry for a few words. And I went to a place in Monterrey, big city in Mexico, to do medicine school. And I did my residency for orthopedic surgeon in Mexico City, in a big hospital. Then, as everybody, I guess, in medical school used to go low fat and all that. And after 38 years old, I started to gain weight, even after CrossFit and running and all that. And my little brother, he's 10 years younger. One day he showed a picture where he's very ripped. And I asked him what he's doing. He told me he was doing keto. So I said, I'm going to read about it, but I guess you're going to die by that. And as long as I read, I figured out it was a good idea to leave the carbs. And as more carbs I left, I felt better until I became full carnivore in January 2nd of 2019. That was my way I came to carnivore, doing a little by a little, losing more carbs until I ate no carbs at all.
Yeah, it's interesting how we, and I came to it in a very similar fashion. You kind of gradually bring that down. You find out that, meat actually works pretty good. And we've got a whole community of thousands and thousands of people that have seen tremendous success. The interesting thing, and I've talked to other orthopedic surgeons, Gary Fettke and a few others over the years that have noticed the same thing with their own. Most of it starts with your own health. You don't really pay attention to nutrition, and that's what affects you. I mean, you're seeing patient after patient after patient that's obese and diabetic and inflamed, and you just, okay, whatever, I'm just gonna, I'm gonna do their knee surgery, or you don't really think about how it impacts you. When it impacts you, it really changes your perception of things. And I think there's a lot of people that fell into that kind of the low fat trap. And I think, for some people it works, but for many people, you just end up eating more and more because you're just not getting any quality nutrition. I just put a nice post about food consumption in the United States, and since 1970, the United States has eaten 14% more plant food and 21% less animal products. And in that 50-year window, we have seen ourselves become more obese, more diabetic, sicker than ever. And so, there's people that continue to point to eating meat, particularly red meat. And red meat, for those who don't know, I know I've mentioned this before, is down something like 35% since the 1970s. We went from an average of about 95, 96 pounds a person per year to about 56. So that's something like a 35, 40% reduction. So anyway, so once you decided to go low carb and carnivore, how did that change you? What happened to you personally?
First, I lost weight quite easily. I didn't have even to exercise. So I didn't exercise for a while due to job and laziness or whatever. And I went from 187 pounds to 145 pounds. I had to check it because we use kilograms. But that was keto. When I turned to carnivore, I went up to 150 without exercise. I gained muscle because I just raised my protein intake. By that time, I read and I saw an interview of Jose Antonio from Florida. Maybe you know him. and a study he did about the protein intake. He used to use 4.4 grams of protein per pound. It was a lot. And nobody felt bad, and everybody improved in 2 years of the study. And I read a little of everything. So in that time I was reading Richard Dawkins. He's an evolutionist. And then I saw a Michael Leeds video about evolution and the way we eat. And that convinced me to go carnivore. A little later, my brother told me, hey, somebody like you is eating like you, and send me your video with Joe Rogan. And I saw the interview. And well, I was not the only one. The interview was before I became carnivore. I was already carnivore when I saw the video. And then I start to change the diet with my patients also. Some will do it, someone will do it. So I always give them 2 options. We can go a standard medical care, pills, surgeries, all that, or we can do mix of medical care. Change your habits, you will improve. And if it's necessary, we can do a surgery or something like that. And some people do change completely. And I have patients, I don't know, with all ready to do a knee surgery for arthroplasty because they are it's hard for me in English, but they do the arthroplasty for the knee, and they have no pain. They can walk, they can go stairs, only because they went carnivore. And the most extreme case was a patient my age. Well, last year he was 47 as I was. Diabetic, very, very sick. And he started with cellulitis on the right leg, from just over the ankle to just below the gluteus. By the time I saw him, he was in real advanced cellulitis. So I did a punction and I took about 180 milliliters of pus. So I did surgery that day. And in the hospital I put him, I talked to the people who was taking care of the food of the hospital. I had to talk with them for half an hour to convince them to only give him eggs and beef. After 6 days, well, when the day he came in, he was with insulin, metformin, and he had more than 380 milligrams of glucose in blood per deciliter. 6 days later, he was going out of the hospital with 110, only metformin and no infection. And he only ate, most of those patients lose the leg. They sometimes lose the life, but most of the time lose the leg. But he is not that good following indications. At the beginning, he did it just as I told him because he was scared of dying and losing the leg. And after a month and a half, he started to eat again some carbs. And he had a little drawback on the leg. Not to do surgery, but a little drawback. So I had talked to him. He came back to carnivore. And then he did recover completely. And went back to work and all his activities. He's eating carbs again, but now he doesn't go as he did before. And his work is, he's a mechanical electrician. So he went to do that kind of activity again. He's very pleased because now anyone in his family got sick, he's sending his family to see them. But that was the first time when I saw a patient in so bad conditions going back to full recovery. That was last year.
Let me just jump in because that's a truly impressive story, because I've seen that, I've seen that situation many times. And maybe I'll, just for people that are having a time with the terms, when you mentioned knee arthroplasty, that's a knee replacement. So you're seeing a lot of people with knee replacements recover tremendously well. And you've got a guy with basically pus up and down his entire leg. His entire leg,
the right leg,
from toes all the way up to his gluteal muscle. Those infections, you drain all the pus out there. He got, nearly 200 cc's of pus, and there's probably more behind there. And that situation, usually that situation ends in maybe multiple times going back to the hospital, washing out several times. Sometimes you end up with tissue dying, and then you start amputating. You cut the foot off, you do a below knee amputation, and that's a typical outcome for these people. And to avoid that is just tremendous. So you basically save this guy, probably put years on his life, because most of these people, once they go through a diabetic amputation, their quality of life rapidly declines. They can't ambulate. They get sicker and sicker. They put on more and more weight. They lose the other leg. And so you've taken this guy from a horrible fate to, maybe even a normal life, and prolonged his life by perhaps even decades. So that's amazing. And it's I don't know why it's not standard of care. You get these people that blood glucose of 380 is huge, going down to normal blood glucose 110. That's amazing. And so anyway, that's a great story.
It was great for him. Yeah. And that was in a private hospital. Here in Mexico, we have a public hospitals also. I work in one public hospital. And the problem I see with the public hospital, they won't change diets. So if I will put this patient in a public hospital, he won't have this outcome, because they won't let me change the diet. So he was fortunate enough to go to the private hospital. And that's one of the cases, but in less impressive case, but also with a lot of improvement, you can see with many orthopedic problems, with gout arthritis. Well, in Spanish we say gota, when uric acid goes too high, but they have joint pains and all that. Many patients are afraid of meat here in Mexico when that happens. And I also give them two options. You can go with allopurinol, colchicina, or stop carbs and only eat meat. And many times I say, do it for 2 weeks. Only eat red meat, 2 weeks, and we see again with new study of your blood results. And they get impressed that the levels of uric acid in blood doesn't change that much. Maybe sometimes go higher, a little lower, but don't change that much. But they have no more pain, no red, no hyperthermia in the joints, because they stop the carbs. And say, don't be afraid to meat. Be afraid what you eat with the meat. And some patients keep doing that way. Some don't come back for the pills. So, but at least they have an option. They know they don't have to live with pills all the life. They decide to do it or not do it.
Yeah, I mean, that's an interesting thing regarding gout, because most people don't know uric acid is actually an antioxidant in our body. And elevated levels don't always correlate with gout symptoms. You can have high uric acid levels and not have gout, and you can have low uric acid levels and still get gout. So I think the underlying metabolic pathology, whether it's insulin resistance, hyperinsulinemia, poor glycemic control, chronic inflammation, seems to be the variables that have to be in place for that uric acid to be relevant. And so it's kind of, it is interesting. I've seen the same thing. I see some people, if they're still metabolically inflamed, initially, switching diet, they may initially even have a gout flare, but generally over time, as they get healthier, they lose the weight. That's not an issue anymore. It goes away. So interesting. So, it's interesting. I don't know what the climate is like in Mexico. I mean, other than being warm, but I'm saying the climate of, practicing medicine and stuff. But, I know that not long ago, I was very impressed to see this, that Mexico was considering taxing sugary drinks or not selling it to young kids. They couldn't buy it in the stores. There was some legislation being passed. I don't know if that went through, what the follow-up is on that has been.
Well, it didn't go through nationally. There is a state of Mexico, in the south of Mexico, called Oaxaca. And in that state, it's not allowed for anyone to sell sugary drinks to people under 18, as if it was alcohol. Here in Mexico, you can drink alcohol 18 and up. So in Oaxaca, you cannot sell sugary drinks to people under 18. And in the rest of Mexico, not only in the drinks, also in the food. They put excess sugars or excess calories, whatever, even in the drinks. So that was something I think is favorable for the people. They have they can choose because they read it, because it's big black labels with white letters where they say the excess they have in the drink. But legally only Oaxaca pass. And about the weather, here in Monclova, yesterday we were 112 degrees Fahrenheit. It's quite warm. And in winter, a few days are cold, 20 something Fahrenheit. We had this winter, few days only. The rest of the time is above zero, about 32. So it's like Austin, a little like that, maybe.
Yeah, nice. It's nice. So, it's interesting with my understanding, Mexico has a pretty big problem with diabetes and obesity.
Yes.
Is that still becoming worse and worse as time goes by?
Yeah, I started orthopedic surgery in the year 2000. So many of the illness I used to see in people over 60, now I'm seeing in people in 50 or even the 40s. People with so bad knees or so bad hips when they are only 40 something, but too young to do an arthroplasty because they will need another surgery because it won't last more than 15 years maybe. And it's a lot. The main issue is most of the people is overfat, under muscle, and chronically inflamed. So, and it has to do obviously with what we eat and what we drink. So many of the patients don't want to, they relate food with joy, and it's okay. But they don't give the chance to start having joy for different kinds of foods. So the bad thing I see is that when the United States decided to go down on fat in the 1980, Mexico just followed. Didn't do any investigations, didn't do their own research. They just start to follow what did the United States. And we did follow with everything else, with diabetes, obesity, hypertension, and all this illness.
Yeah, that is kind of sad because you're starting to see these people in their 40s and late 30s that their knees are so worn out they would be radiographically and looking at X-ray, they'd be candidates for arthroplasty, but you're going to be, you're going to end up having 3 or 4 surgeries in your life if you live long, because you're going to have to replace them and as you know, every time you have to replace one, it's harder and harder. It's technically far more challenging to do a revision than it is a primary, and the
it's a lot
complication rates
riskier.
go up. It's riskier, the complication rates go up, it's more difficult, the outcomes tend not to be as good, so on and so forth. And so and this is the thing, we talk about food enjoyment. Yeah, we all like to eat the junk food, it tastes good, but equally, I mean, I think a good steak or steak and eggs can be a very satisfying meal, and it is. People ask me if I would get bored of eating steak all the time. I say no, I enjoy it. I have a very good dining experience pretty much every single day. And it's been really helpful.
Me too.
What is it? I mean, in the United States and perhaps other parts of the world, there's this continued pressure to save the environment. We need to eat less meat because cows, which have been here for, 50 million years or whenever cows sort of evolved, are now destroying the planet somehow. Do you see that in Mexico? Are we seeing a big push to go plant-based in Mexico as well?
No, well, not as much as the United States. Mexico is a third world country, so many people don't have that much money. So if you go to the countryside, you see a lot of goats, sheep, cows going from place to place, and people from the countryside, even if they drink a lot of sodas and eat a lot of junk food, they eat a lot of meat also, thanks to that. So the government, they are not looking to take that out. And that's a good thing. You see that kind of thinking only in people who have a certain level of economy, because it's more expensive to to go vegan or vegetarian here in Mexico, this and here at the north of Mexico, because it's very dry. So we don't have that easy access to fruits and vegetables, or they are not as cheap as in the south of Mexico. But here is cheaper, the meat. Here you can find, I don't know, where I buy my meat, I buy it for the whole week, and it costs me $8, 2 pounds of ribeye, which is a good price. So many people who knows me from out of Mexico, they say it's too cheap. For me, it's okay. You can find a little more expensive, a little more cheap, but it's a good price for me. And if you want to buy a goat, the full goat will cost you $50. And it's about 10 pounds of meat. We do it about twice or 3 times a month. And we eat all the goats from head to tail, brain, eyes, tongue, whatever. Tastes great. But most of the time we eat T-bones, ribeyes, and eggs because they are cheap.
Yeah, I mean that's a very good point. When we talk about this perspective in different parts of the world, where people don't have as much money, they are very thankful to have any kind of nutrition from meat. And it's very much a westernized, affluent sort of belief that you can eat this sort of synthetic meat and afford to go vegan and import your foods from all over the world, which is not something that most of the people in the world do. And I think the majority of the people that depend upon more or less a plant-based diet, we can look at sub-Saharan Africa and parts of Asia, and they do it because they're out of necessity, because they just can't afford anything else. So they just kind of eat grains by default because that's all that's available to them. It's super cheap. But yeah, that's an interesting point. And the fact that goat is a great source of nutrition. I mean, I think it's I mean, most animals are, but I mean, goat is probably an underrated meat here in the West. We don't get other than goat cheese, it's very hard for me to get goat in the United States. I mean, you can. I mean, you have to really look for it, but it's not in every grocery store for sure. It's very rare. I mean, I actually have a hard time finding lamb on the shelves. That's something that's kind of crazily rare. It's very common in other parts of the world.
And that's quite funny because, well, here where I live is a small town. It's about 250,000 people, and we have stores, Mexican stores like Soriana and Merco, where we have American stores like H-E-B and Walmart. And yesterday I was at the H-E-B, and you can buy goat, the full goat in H-E-B here in Monclova. It's more expensive than the goat I get from people who raise the goats, so I didn't buy that there. But I never seen that in the United States, that you can go to H-E-B or Walmart and buy a goat. So they adapt to the places they open up. But I saw goat, and you can see things we eat here. So they adapt. I guess that if people start to look for goat in the United States, they will sell it because they do it even here.
Yeah, when I was in France, you'll see horse in the supermarket, which some people would be shocked by, but it's different parts of the world. Different cultures eat different food based on what their culture has dictated and what they have prevalent, and so you can find that there. But as since you've been doing this for a couple of years now, obviously your perspective on probably a lot of things have changed, with regard to nutrition and health. Do you get any sort of pushback from colleagues, from other orthopedic surgeons in the area, and other people in the hospital? What are the thoughts with that?
Well, I think it's easier to explain to someone who is not a doctor that this is a good way to eat, because doctors in general and nutritionists in general think they know everything about nutrition. Even doctors, we don't take that much of classes of nutrition, or at least here in Mexico, we talk about 1 or 2 hours of nutrition class in 6 years of school, and we think that we know a lot. So when I start to tell them, hey, you have to change this and that, the new doctors, they don't care what I say. But the doctors that knew me when I was heavy and tired and with some pains, they say, well, it works for you, but doesn't mean it's good. So even that they saw a change, they are not that convinced, unfortunately. And I have talked with many of them. Only one has followed the diet completely, very few partially. but the doctors are the more difficult to try to change their mind. And many times I don't listen to me, read this, read that. So I give them options to read, and they just won't do it because they already know that. That's how I see it here in Mexico. This.
Yeah, I think, I can tell you orthopedics is probably the field that has the least interest in nutrition. There's nothing in textbooks that'll talk about nutrition. I've looked through, I mean, it's so, I've never seen any condition where they talk about changing someone's diet. I mean, at best they'll say, obesity is a problem or something. There's, obviously there's a high correlation with diabetes and all kinds of orthopedic, pathology. But let me ask you about this, because when I went into orthopedics, like you many decades ago, you're kind of taught about, osteoarthritis, for instance, wear and tear, abnormal joint loading, obesity increases the weight, and therefore, but I think we're seeing a shift in the etiology of that is it's probably more of a metabolic inflammatory issue that's driving some of this inflammatory pathology that even, we've got the inflammatory arthropathies, rheumatoid arthritis, psoriatic arthritis, and some of these, ankylosing spondylitis and that sort of stuff. But I mean, I think just even regular arthritis, because what I would see is not people that were in a lot of trauma or athletes, but it would just be obese people, like these obese middle-aged women that are in their 50s and 60s. They weren't out there, playing football and soccer and, crashing their knee. They were just walking around. And yet I think it's the inflammation. What are your thoughts on the etiology of this sort of stuff? And are you finding like other orthopedic conditions that are probably related to just lifestyle, besides that, like, I don't know, I think rotator cuff pathology and carpal tunnel syndrome and all these common things, I think they have a lifestyle component. What are your thoughts?
Well, it's changing the way we see that. When I was starting my residency in 2000, they say people with obesity will have all fast aging of their articulations due to obesity. And it has slowly changing. And before COVID, I went to a congress here in Mexico about orthopedic surgeon and traumatology. And they already start to talk about metabolic osteoarthritis. It's time to consider that diet has something to do with the joint aging, and they see it as a problem with insulin, maybe glucose, but they have not changed that much the diet, but they starting to use the word metabolic lesions. So, and due to COVID, well, last year was no Congress at all, so everything was virtual. But it's a good thing that at least in 2019, they start to see it as a metabolic problem, at least in the Congress where I used to go here in Mexico.
Yeah, that there's been a couple papers. I mean, University of Alabama put out a paper looking at low carb diets and knee osteoarthritic pain compared to low fat diets, and they saw low carb diet got better. There's another paper looking recently at the role of the I think it was the synovial site in its response to insulin, and they saw that synovial.
I saw that paper. Yeah, it was about the early last year. That paper
yeah.
came out.
I posted that a couple of times.
Yeah,
so it's interesting.
I read it. It was very interesting that they how the macrophage went to the synovial and do the harm there, inflammation harm. Yeah. It was a good paper.
Inflammatory cytokines are revved up by insulin, and so when our insulin levels are chronically high due to excess of calories, eating too much or eating too much, particularly carbohydrates seems to drive that. So it's interesting. It was interesting when I was still actively practicing. I started to start drawing fasting insulins in some of my patients, and I was seeing relationships. I had somebody come in with carpal tunnel syndrome. I said, listen, and it was hard because there's no real CPT code or diagnostic code that would associate getting insulin for carpal tunnel syndrome. But I was curious, so I had to fight with insurance companies to get it drawn. But I started seeing a pretty significant correlation to high fasting insulin and some of these orthopedic conditions, and it was just, it just confirmed some of my suspicions that this has a metabolic origin. So it was interesting.
Yeah, I have done it two different ways. Here in the public hospital, we cannot do insulin. So I started to do C-peptide, that is a peptide that get released when you produce insulin. And in my private practice, I check for insulin, many of these illnesses. And they sometimes are rocket high, they're incredible high. And so I do it so the patient can see a number. Look how your number is, it's extremely high. We're going to try to take this number down. And I'm focused on insulin, not glucose or something like that. So to do that, they have to go low carb or no carb. And as the insulin goes down, they start to feel the improvement. So some of the patients who are willing to do that, they say, okay, let's see numbers. We see insulin numbers mainly. And when they improve insulin, they improve health also.
Yeah, that's pretty fascinating. Let me ask you about one of the reasons that what I'm doing here with this sort of company and the support system is I find it very difficult to get a patient the support they need to do low carb or carnivore or something like that. You know, it's hard to do, and it often requires a lot of. I mean, it's not. In theory, it's not hard to do. You just tell people just eat a bunch of meat and you're good. But to get people to actually do it and stick with it and have the support requires almost a huge support network, which most hospitals don't provide. I mean, most of the nutritionists have no experience with that and are generally going to be opposed to that. So how do you, for the people you do manage to persuade to try it, how does that go? How do you keep them on track? I mean, how do you keep them accountable? How do you keep them compliant with that?
Well, I don't do it forever because I have the fortune of having too many patients, but I do that for 3 to 6 months only. And what I do is that use numbers. And most of the people have overweight, high levels of insulin. So I explain the diet. Some people don't want to go full carnivore, so you can eat these few carbs. Well, I have not yet in these 2 years found one single nutritionist that can help me the way I want. Because if I send them to them, the first thing they do is you have to eat 5 times a day, low fat and all that. So they go with the insulin up again, and they start to do what exactly the opposite I want to do. So I have to do it in my office, see the patient, and help him do it for at least 3 to 6 months. And then say, well, you did it for this long, you can do it for as long as you want to. And let him do it by himself. Always, if you have questions or you have a new problem, you are welcome to come back. But I haven't found yet some nutritionists, at least here in Monclova, that can help me to look to insulin, to take down insulin. They do exactly the opposite.
Yeah, and I would argue sometimes they're not even very good at reducing glucose, not alone insulin. I mean,
Yeah,
a lot of times they have the diabetics and they tell them you need to eat X amount of carbs to keep it from dropping, and they're more worried about hypoglycemia than anything else, particularly in those diabetics that are insulin dependent. So what is as far as conditions you've seen, as far as improving with this? I mean, obviously you're seeing mostly orthopedic stuff, but I mean, what conditions have responded to diet outside of the diabetic stuff?
Well, almost in anything that relates with obesity, actually. People with obesity, I see it this way, they start to age their articulations quite fast. And some people with related illness, even if they have no obesity or apparent obesity, like hypertension, or many people who have weakness, has to do with that also, because they eat not enough nutrients. They don't do anything to exercise. So I've seen patients that 1 month come because the shoulder hurts, then next month is the knee, whatever. And also like osteoporosis, they improve a lot with a little weight lifting and a lot of protein. Well, for them it's a lot. For me, it will be just basic. In I tell them to eat at least 2 grams per kilogram of protein per day. It will be about 4 grams per pound, something like that, as a minimum to improve in osteoporosis. And I give that option, or you can take calcium, vitamin D, phosphonates, and all that. It's more common in women. So most of the women at the beginning say yes, then some drop out and they prefer the pills. But those women, even they are 50, 60, or even older, if they start to do a little weightlifting and they improve their protein intake, with no medications, they will take off the osteoporosis, they will improve. Something that pills will never do by itself. So almost anything related with orthopedic and bone health and muscle health, the diet has to do with it.
Yeah, I agree wholeheartedly. I think many of these chronic orthopedic conditions are just metabolic syndrome. They're just the orthopedic side, and
yeah,
it's
almost in everything.
Yeah, it really truly is. It's fascinating because you look at it through a different lens and you just see these people and you're just like, this could be fixed, and it's one of those things I found that, well, you talk about the cartilage, and so if you sometimes you have to do a knee scope on a young child. You get a 12, 14-year-old kid in there and it's pristine white, smooth and beautiful. You get to a 40-year-old sometimes and it's yellow, it's cracked, there's pieces missing. And I think that's, what's causing a yellow discoloration or almost a brown color to the cartilage. I wonder if it's glycation. You've got these, it's just like when you brown meat, you have this Maillard reaction going on. I think you have this chronic Maillard reaction going on, and I
believe it's glycation.
Glycation, right? Yeah.
Yeah, I believe it's glycation. It has to do also with a little inflammation, but I guess mainly it's glycation. I had many years ago, before I became carnivore and all that, a patient who was 83 years old, and he had almost a carnivore diet. It was about 2011, 2012, and he hurt his knee doing weightlifting at the 83. And I didn't know nothing about nutrition at that time. So I said, hey, well, don't do weights, you're too old and stuff like that. So I did a arthroscopy in his knee because he is still complaining about pain. And the MRI showed like it could be a medial meniscus injury. So I did the arthroscopy. The meniscus was okay. The cartilage was a little yellow, but it was very well for his age. It was like a young cartilage, and he had a plica. So the pain was due to a plica. So he took the plica off, and he went back to his life again as normal. And I said, well, you won the lottery of the gene pool, because I didn't know nothing about nutrition at that time. So after many years, I said, that man ate like we should eat. But I became to that conclusion after I started to eat like that, not before, unfortunately. And I had the proof in front of me, and I couldn't see it.
Yeah, if you're not looking for it, you don't see it. It's probably seen us many times, and that is an interesting thing because you've got an 80-year-old with almost very young looking cartilage, and I think the cartilage aging is largely due to lifestyle related things and less due to trauma. I mean, we're designed to run and jump and all those things that I think that's how humans survive for eons and eons. And so it's interesting. I also had I remember an 83-year-old female. It's interesting. There was a movie made about her called Year of the Caribou, and she lived out in the Alaska wilds by herself with her husband for like 20 years, and they survived on caribou and not much else. And that's how they lived for years. And she said she'd never been healthier in her life. I ended up doing hip replacements for her in her 80s, but I mean, she was extremely active, and she'd lived on caribou, and then she went back to a more standard diet later, but she said she never felt better than when she was doing basically this all meat diet back in the 19.
And it was like that because the great diet she had.
Yeah, that's pretty amazing. do you have patients? I mean, I don't know what your reach is, or or if you're on media or stuff like. Do you have patients that come to you because of the dietary support? Do you have people that are you known as a low carb doctor in Mexico now?
No, not in Mexico. Here in my hometown, even people know I'm a carnivore. Well, because many patients I have talked to them about carnivore. So some patients will look for me only for diet stuff. I enjoy a lot doing surgery. So I still see a lot of trauma. I do a lot of um, fracture surgery, polyfracture patients, and orthopedic surgery. I do a lot of hallux valgus, knee replacements, knee arthroscopy. And that's my main work. But I have patients that come to me and I say, well, I'm going to charge you as you were orthopedic patients. And they accept that. So I take the studies and all that, and I start to help them. But sometimes they are only like sport people. They want to improve in the sport they do and stuff like that. And I'm starting to see a lot more sport patients as orthopedic or traumatologists and than before, and many young ones. I don't know why, but it's trying to raise that number a lot. And they already, mostly the young ones, they're starting to understand that carbs is not that as good as they thought or their parents thought they were. So they want to improve very few things, maybe an impingement in the ankle and stuff like that. So the diets are starting to be better than the parents' diets, even they live in the same house. And sometimes it's harder to talk to the parents than to the patients because they are many times so young that the parents are the one who provide the food. So, and they say he doesn't want to eat his fruits and vegetables. Talk to him and say, no, you talk to him. Only eat meat. It's okay. Sometimes the parents will think I want to improve, to say something to his diet because I will convince him to eat fruits, vegetables. And I say, no. Just take out, because many times we eat a lot of tortillas in Mexico. So I say, he's young, he can take the tortillas, but if he eats no tortillas, it's even better. So don't worry about vegetables and fruit. Let him eat the meat. And the parents are not so convinced. The patients, the young ones, are very well convinced before they came to the office.
Yeah, I mean, especially regarding vegetables. I mean, almost no kids want to eat vegetables unless you try to
No.
train them and force them. I mean, that's just human nature. But let me, it's interesting about the sports. I just saw an article. Michael Jordan, arguably one of the greatest basketball players of all time, was his bizarre pregame ritual was he ate an entire steak before every single basketball game, and that's what he claimed it gave him better performance. And I'm seeing that with a lot of athletes now, including very high level athletes who've done that. But I want to ask you about. This is a thing that you mentioned earlier, and I want to just kind of delve into this a little more. You do have surgical patients, and
yes.
Nutrition in the pre and post-operative period does impact the outcomes. I find with inflammation, with pain, with range of motion, I know my arthroplasty patients, my knee replacement patients, if they were on a high carb diet, they often had more pain, they had more inflammation, they might have more wound complications, they had more swelling, and ultimately a worse result because they couldn't achieve the range of motion early because of all those factors. Have you found that nutrition in that perioperative time makes a difference, and are you able to impact that with the hospitals?
Yes. When I see patients, sometimes before surgery, we change diet, and some people won't do surgery anymore because they have no pain. But the people who still have pain, I tell them to keep the diet. So some people will never do the diet, but the few that do the diet, the range of motion, let's say a knee replacement, will improve very fast in a little time. The wound will heal faster also because they have enough nutrients, I guess, or too many proteins will do that the wound will heal very fast. So they will be walking and doing almost normal activity about 1 month, a little more, a little less. And people who are diabetic with obesity has the same diet, don't want to change. I've seen patients after months and months that they only can flex the knee about 70 degrees and they cannot do the rest. And it's hard to them to understand that diet is affecting the healing due to inflammation. And some people even with the pain won't change diet, so that's too sad. But the ones who change diet, they improve a lot the movement before time and the wound healing before time.
It's interesting. We don't have any studies on just purely meat-based diets looking at it, but there's an interesting dermatologist out of Italy that's done a number of studies looking at actually vegan, so the opposite outcome, looking at incisions and skin healing and different skin properties. And she found that in every one of those studies, I think she has 4 studies out there, for one of them was looking at wound healing and scar dehiscence and, wound dehiscence and poor healing properties. And the vegans had always had a worse outcome. And so there must be something in meat that is helping us heal more. And so, you think about it, when people ask me what they should eat after surgery or for surgery, I said, go eat plenty of steak, just eat a bunch of steak so you can heal. It's going to help you heal more. I think there's something to it. It'd be nice to get some more studies to clarify this, but I don't know, like I said, I try to put these studies up on social media and some people will pay attention, some won't, but that information is out there. And we've seen things like albumin status, and we, as orthopedic surgeons, you pay attention to white count and albumin and, those types of things, but we don't really do anything to impact those. The best I've seen was literally in my entire medical training, all the years I did my residency and stuff, the only time I saw anybody actively trying to improve nutrition was a pediatric urologist who insisted that his patients get a multivitamin, because he was convinced that they weren't getting enough vitamins, and so he'd give them multivitamin in the peri-surgical time or perioperative time. And that was the only time I saw anyone talk about nutrition. So it's we've got a long way to go to kind of educate people.
Yeah.
I think.
Actually, what I do with my patients is I recommend ruminant meat, beef, goat, lamb, whatever, and eggs. And only to eat pork or chicken or fish when they get bored of eating meat and eggs. Say, okay, one day you can eat fish or chicken or whatever, but most of the time is ruminant and eggs. And I have with people who do it, I have a real good results in improvement after surgery. And some people, even before surgery, they don't get to the surgery because they have no more pain. In that kind of surgery, you want to get free of pain. So if you get free of pain before the surgery is worthless anymore.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the main indication for doing these surgeries, particularly like the arthroplasty, is going to be pain, unless there's some significant deformity, but for most people, it's pain is the indication. If the pain goes away, there's no reason to do the surgery. And I ran into that too. In the US system, not doing surgery as a surgeon is not popular. I can tell you that with hospital administrators. And so they want that surgical, they want those surgical dollars and all the money that comes with it, with the rehabs and all the imaging and lab and operation. OR time utilization, so on and so forth. If an OR, just for you guys that don't know, if an OR is not being used, they are losing money. And I don't know if it's the same thing in Mexico, but in the US, that's for sure. They like to run that OR as much as possible. So
I guess not. Government here is the public hospital. The biggest one is called Instituto Mexicano del Seguro Social. And government knows it's paying too much for diabetes, hypertension, obesity, and all that, and they try to run programs to do make people to get off of obesity and all these kinds of illness, but people won't do it so easily, unfortunately. And I have the good luck to do also traumatology. So if one day, hopefully, everybody starts to eat meat instead of carbs, health will improve a lot. But in a place where it's a lot of industrial work, like in this town, there's always people who fracture themselves. So there is work for doctors anyway. no, you don't have to see only people with obesity and all that. Well, in my case, all this, and many doctors I know. But I guess the government main issue will be, from my point of view, is take off wheat and flour and sugar and vegetable oils, and you will improve a lot, general population health. I don't think that will happen any soon. Maybe I will never see it. I don't know.
Yeah, that is the thing. I mean, there's such an economic model built on, that, not only the food system, but the pharmaceutical system, which, like I said, I can speak to the US numbers, is huge. I mean, they're multi-billion dollar industries, and they depend upon that model staying in place. And so to turn that around is going to take a huge effort, and it's going to take enough people to realize what's going on. And it's it seems like, you just kind of continually try to get the message out there, and some people are listening, some aren't. We're slowly growing, I think that's for sure. We're seeing more people that do that. I'll tell you what, this has been fun. It's been about an hour, and I want to be respectful of your time.
That's fast.
Sunday. Let folks know, I don't know if you have a social media account or where people can go to find you or learn more, perhaps if they want to talk about stuff in the Spanish language, because one of the things we're trying to do is, get this message out in many different languages. So where do they go to find you?
Well, my name is Alfredo Lozano Morelos, and they can find me. I have 2 pages in Facebook, one as a doctor, one as a general person, a public person. And I don't do too much social media, but in any of those 2 pages, anyone who wants to know anything about the diet, whatever, I will be very happy to help them. And before we go, I have 2 questions for you. How did you know about me? Because I have no way. Well, I was surprised, really. I was very, very surprised.
Well, I'll tell you, my team, I think we have a social media team, and I don't know if Amanda's here, she may not be, but she often finds different people that seem to be aligned. And but sometimes I find the people, but I think that's one of the cases where she found it. Because I was going to ask, is I don't really go on Facebook. It's something that I spend very little time on, and so. But I was really happy to see, because I saw we had coming up. I saw another orthopedic surgeon. I said, awesome, because it's great. It's great to have more people in this field. That I think is. I mean, I think it's can. Honestly, I think, if we, like I said, if you could give up all the processed food and the grains and wheats and to a degree, or cut those back significantly, much of what we do as physicians would be unnecessary, and we would be left with the trauma and some of the infections and maybe the child care and OB-GYN, and most of the other stuff you wouldn't need much of. It would be, it would go away. We'd probably cut back. In the United States, we're spending, it's probably more than since the last look, but it's like $3.5 trillion a year directly in healthcare costs, and probably 80% of that would be unnecessary, which is kind of crazy to think about. But
yeah, that's sad. And anyway, the second question,
sure,
is I went to Merrimack, New Hampshire when I was in high school, 1988. I became a football fan for Patriots. If you have the chance to say Cam needs to go carnivore, please tell him. He's not a good quarterback going vegan.
Oh, Cam Newton. Yeah, I've been riding Cam Newton for a while. I don't think he probably pays attention, but yeah, he's injured again. I think he injured his hand. And this is a funny thing. They talk about Tom Brady. When you look at Tom Brady's diet, 20% of his diet is coming from meat and fish and eggs, which is actually more than the average American eats. Particularly meat. We get less than that. The average American is getting something like 70% of his diet from plants, and mostly wheat, grain, sugar, and seed oils. And then the other 30%, which is animal products, much of it is just milk and dairy. And there's a small percentage, which becomes up maybe 5% red meat, and eggs is a couple percent, seafood 1%. So he's actually eating more meat than the average American, which gets lost in he's just not eating the junk food. And I think that's the important part. If you don't eat junk food and you eat enough meat, you're going to be doing pretty well. And so, we've got, there's a fellow on the Kansas City Chiefs who was, won the Super Bowl the year before, and we're in the Super Bowl this year, by the name of Danny Sorensen, and he is fully on a carnivore diet and had his best season of his career. And so
that's great.
We are seeing, like I said, we're seeing a lot of big name athletes now that are adopting this carnivorous approach and doing quite well with it. So, okay, guys, thank you so much. It's been a real pleasure. You know, if I ever get down to Mexico, I'll have to look you up one of these days. But
you have a house here to go.
oh, thank you. I appreciate it. Awesome. And same thing if you come up to, well, I'll be in different parts of the U.S., but love to see you sometime. Okay, guys, you guys have a great weekend and or great week. I guess it's Sunday. So we'll see you guys tomorrow. Bye-bye, everybody.